In this video, I will try to introduce the concept of supply chain management. So basically, when we are trying to define the supply chain management, first of all, we need to understand what is a supply chain and then what are the structure and the components of the supply chain are. And then we will try to define the supply chain management concept. And then in the end, I will try to link the different supply chain activities with the SCOR model. Okay. So let me first of all define so how we can define the supply chain. So basically supply chain is network of organization, or you can say the network of firms or facilities that involve transforming the raw material into the finished product, and then that finished product must be distributed to the customer, or you can say the final consumer or the final customer. Okay. So when we are defining the supply chain, so we are basically dealing three types of flows. One is the physical flow, that is basically from moving from the manufacturing firm towards the customer. Okay, then we have the financial flow as well as we have the information flow. So as you can see from this particular diagram, the flow of information is moving both way. Okay, so generally, of course, the information comes from customer towards the manufacturer in terms of orders, and from manufacturer to customer in terms of what's the status of the order is. And then the physical flow is basically indicating the flow of the product. Okay, from manufacturer or supplier towards the customer. And of course then there is a financial payment flow. So we have to manage these three flows. Now the question is this supply chain structure is simple enough? So we have a manufacturer, and then we have a customer, or we have a supplier, or and we have a customer? No. So actually in a supply chain, as you can see that this is the manufacturing firm. Okay. So the firm, those are supplying the product to this, that would be normally called as a first tiers of suppliers, and then we have a second tiers of suppliers. And the relationship between those suppliers and the manufacturing firm is not only the linear relationship. So when I am saying the linear, that means the second tier only distributing to the first supplier, and then the first supplier is only distributing the manufacturing. So this is not actually happening. Even they have the non-linear relationship. So this particular supplier, as you can see from this particular diagram, is distributing to this particular supplier as well as maybe distributing to this particular manufacturing firm. So these activities, or you can say that these streams would be called as a upstream supply chain processes, or you can say upstream supply chain perspective. Whereas when we are talking about this one, this is called as a downstream supply chain. Okay, so this one is called as a downstream supply chain, where we have the wholesalers, we have the distributors. Okay, and then we have the retails and the final customers, right? So this is the downstream supply chain, this is the upstream supply chain, this is basically the manufacturing, and these arrows are basically indicating the storage activities or the transportation which we are moving from this place to this place. Okay, and then of course between them we may have the storage areas, right? So this is how we can managing the supply chain, the product and the service flow, as well as recycling and return if it is occurring. Now, I'm giving you a brief example that was regarding a bicycle supply chain perspective. So this is basically we are assembling a bike. Okay, so from the first tier of suppliers, so we are getting the structure of the bike, right? Brake systems, wheels. Okay, for this particular supplier, so this need rubber, so this they are getting from another supplier. So this is the first tier suppliers. So for the bicycle, this is for the you can say the second tier suppliers. And once this bike is assembled, or you can say the manufacturer, it goes to the distributor or the wholesaler or the dealers, and they are distributing to the final customer, or you can say providing the product to the final customer. So I hope you got the idea regarding so how we can define a supply chain. The important component is we have to manage the three types of flow: physical flow, information flow, as well the financial flow. And the relationship between these suppliers, the first tier supplier, the second tier supplier, the manufacturer, and the distribution, is not compulsory. It is always linear. It could be a non-linear relationship, as you can see from this one. Okay. Now, let's see what kind of structure or the components in a supply chain. As we have discussed earlier, so in a supply chain where I am saying the work in process inventory, that is basically, this is basically the manufacturing part. Okay, so up on the upper side, this is basically the upstream supply chain, and this is downstream supply chain. So in a upstream supply chain, generally we are dealing with the sourcing activity, or you can say procurement activities from the external suppliers. Okay, we are selecting the suppliers, we are developing the pricing, okay, delivery times, payments, managing the inventory. So these are the activities we are usually doing in the upstream supply chain. Whereas in the manufacturing portion, whether we are manufacturing the product, we are assembling the product, we are packaging the product, we have the scheduling the different types of jobs. Okay, which particular job will be performed first on which particular machine. Okay, we are monitoring the quality of the product. Okay, as well as workers productivity, machines productivity, all are in the manufacturing activities. Okay, whereas in a downstream supply chain, so basically customers are receiving the orders. Okay, so we are developing a network of warehouses. Okay, which retailer will be getting the product. Okay, so all the schedule are developing in a downstream supply chain. So based on that, we can define the supply chain management. Okay, so we know what is the supply chain, what is the structure of the supply chain is. Now we can define how we can define the supply chain management. So basically, supply chain management deals with the management of material, which is a physical flow, information flow, and financial flow in a network consisting of supplier, manufacturer, distributor, and customer. So according to the Stanford Supply Chain Forum, so how we can define the supply chain management. So as you can see that, so in a supply chain, okay, so we can also say that is a active management of supply chain activities and their relationship in order to provide the maximum value to the customer and getting the sustainable competitive advantage. Now the question is, what is the supply chain activities? So to answer this, so the best word is that is called the SCOR model, which is the supply chain operational reference model. So in a supply chain, as you can see that this is a second tier supplier, this is a first tier. Okay, this is your manufacturing company. Okay, and this is basically the downstream supply chain. Okay, so this is from your company, it goes to wholesaler or dealer, and then from wholesaler to dealer towards the final customer. So in a supply chain operation, so we are basically performing the five broad areas such as planning, sourcing activities, making, or you can say manufacturing or the production activities, delivery, or return. So these are the five main activities in the entire supply chain we are performing. So supplier to supplier, we are dealing out of these five activities. Supplier, okay, to the manufacturer, so they are doing some activities. So basically, from the supply chain perspective, we are dealing with five types of broader areas, that is planning, sourcing, making, delivery, and return. Now the question is, in planning, what kind of thing we are performing? So basically the planning activity seeks to balance the demand requirement from the customer, as well as based on the demand we have to check whether we have available enough resources, mean we have enough capacity, whether we have enough availability of labors. Okay, and then we have to communicate these plans to the various participants. Okay, so let me show you a model. Here what I am saying that I have taken from this research paper. So they indicating the SCORE activities, which is plan, source, make, deliver, and return. So basically we are doing the three types of decision making, or you can say three level of decision making. strategic, okay, which are generally yearly basis we are doing the decisions, tactical based on months, okay, whereas operational which we are doing day to day decisions, okay. So these are the decisions which we have to take. Okay, as we have seen in a planning, what we are trying to do is that is we are trying to forecast the demand. However, we would be able to meet that demand. So we have to check whether we have the enough capacity available, we have enough financial amount is available, enough machinery is available, enough labor is available in order to meet this particular demand. So this is the planning part. Okay, whereas in sourcing, what we are trying to do is we are trying to identifying, developing, and contracting the suppliers. Okay, and then scheduling the delivery. So these are the sourcing activity. So if we break down this sourcing activity at a strategic level, at a tactical level, and operational. So at a strategic level, we are basically selecting the suppliers. Okay, so here we are dealing with the, so we are developing the supply chain contracts, okay, what kind of contract we are going to perform, okay, with the suppliers, as well as in a operational we are trying to managing the inventory, we are doing the material requirement plans, right. So this is basically the sourcing part. Now, if we are moving towards the make or the production activity, which is actually covering the producing the product, okay, so actually we are production related activities. So at a strategic level, so in a make, basically we are deciding where we have to locate the plant, what kind of the product mix we are going to use, okay, we are doing the aggregate production planning, or you can say sales and operations planning, in which we are trying to meet the forecasted demand, okay, as well as we are checking the enough capacity is available or not. In the operational we are doing the workforce scheduling or order scheduling and so on, okay. If we come to the delivery activity, so here we are doing everything from entering customer order to deliver that order, okay. So in delivery perspective, so what kind of decision we are taking at a strategic level, that is what should be the location of the distribution center would be, so how our transportation will move, mean how many vehicles we needed, okay, what should the route they will going to adopt. So basically we are doing the fleet planning perspective, okay. So once we find out, okay, how many vehicles we will need based on the distribution center, then at a tactical level we are developing a distribution or transportation plan, we are adopting different type of inventory policy against appropriate location perspective, and then we are in a operational level we are deciding the vehicle routing, or you can say delivery schedule, right. Now, if we come towards the last type of activities, which is return, that is, which include the activity that is necessary to return or the process defective. So, what will we will do? At a strategic level, obviously, we are deciding what would be the location of your return center, okay, and what would be the distribution plan, okay, how we are going to deal with if there is a defective product or that we are recalling the product, so how we are going to deal with that. And of course here we are also dealing with the vehicle routing type of problem, where we are dealing with the return collections, okay. So I hope you got the idea regarding so how we can define the supply chain, what is the structure of the supply chain, okay, in an upstream supply chain and in a downstream supply chain, what kind of activities we are performing. And in order to manage the supply chain, we can say that we are broadly divide those supply chain management activities into the 5 areas with the help of SCOR model, which is plan, source, make, deliver, and return. And in 5 areas we are dealing the 3 levels of decision making, with whether we are doing the strategic decisions, tactical, and operation. So we have discussed what kind of decision making in sourcing we are going to deal, in make, and deliver, and return. So thank you so much. See you in the next video.